Hello everyone, and welcome to episode 28 of the Dungeon Lore series. In this series, I hope to expand upon things you might not know about Final Fantasy XIV dungeons, as well as discuss their individual stories and lore. This episode's dungeon is the Keeper of the Lake. Of all the events to occur prior to our time on Eorzea, the Battle of Silver-Tear Skies was the most likely catalyst to propel us into action. A devastating conflict in which the invading Garleans were halted by none other than the Midgard Sorma, father of all dragons himself. After the dragon had successfully begun to sink the flagship known as the Agrius, the ship released a devastating explosion, its cerulean tanks bursting and releasing, which in turn slew the great dragon. The long-term effects of the explosion turned Mordona permanently to a crystallized state, with much of the plants and trees being overwhelmed by the change in the etheric content. Additionally, the waters of the lake receded somewhat, revealing much more land than previously thought to exist. The Agrius meanwhile collided with the lake, where it remains to this day with Midgard Sorma entwined around its hull, giving the dragon the new title of Keeper of the Lake. In the current times, the Warrior of Light recently pursued Izael Iceheart and managed to defeat the primal form of Saint Shiva that the former had summoned. After this, Izael willed us to seek the Keeper of the Lake for answers, and as she disappeared, spoke the words, hear, feel, think, akin to those spoken by Hydaelyn herself to the few that possess the echo. Amongst recapturing the Garlean spy found within the Immortal Flames, as well as finding a way to capture and defeat the Ascians orchestrating their plans for the rejoining, Minfilia moves to keep watch on the remains of the Keeper of the Lake, and to attempt to avoid any knowledge of a primal being summoned through a civilized being, and not through a ritual by way of the Beast Tribes, to be discovered by Garlemald. After tracking down a black market mercantile crew to confiscate and repurpose a shipment of weapons, we are called to the Rising Stones to speak with Lucia, who informs us that the astrologians of Ishgard have noted that the Dragon Star burns brighter than it has done in 15 years, since the Battle of Silver-Tear Skies. The star's intensity is said to correspond to the call of a great worm, and the astrologians believe Midgard Sorma himself is responsible. Although such signs are nothing concrete, the looming shadow of the return of the King of Kings poses too much of a danger to leave well alone, and so Sir Emmerich has entrusted the task to the Warrior of Light to investigate. With the alternative being a terrible battle between the dragons called forth and the Ishgardian Temple Knights, we make our way to the lakeshore to prepare. We discover here that the Garleans have even been spotted entering and leaving the ruins, apparently in search of salvage materials for the nearby Castrum Sentry. The Doman Watch stationed on the shore bids us take a more subtle approach via a small boat to enter the place, as we bring a handful of adventurers along to discover the truth of the Father of Dragons. Arriving at the base of the ruined flagship, we begin to walk across a mix of debris from the Agrius, as well as outcrops of the now crystalline rock within the lake. In this first area, the enemies appeared to be creatures coming forth from the lake, many aquatic beasts and serpents. Notably, a large serpentine creature here is known as the Son of the Keeper, perhaps referencing its similar body structure. Following the path across a collapsed portion of the Agrius' hull, we defeat more enemies and reach the central part of the hull, where we face the Ironhander, a horned, flying creature with only a single talon. During the fight, the creature occasionally uses its fellows to retrieve salvage from the hull in the form of cannons and undetonated explosives. Its resounding screech will call down several more of its kind, which in turn will deploy the explosives. Ironhander itself will dash to one side of the arena and attempt to detonate the explosives in two different ways. It will use the cannon held in its hand to either fire in a straight line to detonate two explosives, causing a chain reaction as the flames reach the others, or use the cannon to blast the entire arena, forcing the party into a small spot away from any of the surrounding bombs. Upon defeat, we can head forth onto the thick cables from the Agrius, and proceed to the quarterdeck. We find ourselves immediately face to face with the patrolling and stationed Garlean forces here, even having to open the Magitech barriers placed as a security measure. We head up the stairs onto the scaffolds, where we find more troops awaiting us. There are also 2 Colossi within Magitech barriers here, which must be freed and defeated in order to find the next identification key. After opening the next barrier, the alarm is disabled and we proceed to the Cerulean Spill, where we find a Magitech gunship guarding our way forward. During this fight, the gunship uses its fire-based weapons to attempt to inflame the party. It uses its flamethrower on a random party member, spilling forth a large blast of fire in front of the gunship, and when injured, the ship calls forth more troops while it attempts to bombard the arena with fiery pools. This being another dungeon changed in-game recently, the gunship used to target a party member for its pools of flame, and was well known for causing much havoc during the fight. After this, we can again climb more of the rubble up to the stern of the Agrias. Here the walkable ground changes significantly, as we step out onto the very back of Midgard Sorma's body. Continuing forth, another gunship appears and begins bombarding the party from a distance, incidentally clearing the rubble from our path as we carry on upwards. Nearing the top of the remains of the dragon and the ship, we find a handful of draconic foes awaiting us, all loyal to their great father even in his dying moments. And once these dragons fall, we arrive at the forsworn promise to discover the true meaning of Izael's words. On approach, Midgard Sorma himself begins speaking to us, wondering who dares tread upon the bones of the mighty father of dragons. He then brings forth his spirit, manifesting in a ghostly recreation of his form, and roars as he prepares to attack. The father of dragons wields many abilities at his disposal, all signature to the dragonkind. He uses inner and outer turmoil, blasting one part of the arena with a blue flame, and uses disgust to damage the party. The key parts of this battle are the phantom kin used by Midgard Sorma, which calls upon 2 ghostly dragons. In tandem with his next ability, these 2 dragons use their own admonishment ability to blast anyone stood in front of them, while Midgard Sorma himself can cast several abilities at the same time. When injured, the dragon uses its dangerous Akmorn, the deadliest ability of the dragonkind, which blasts the party several times in succession. Finally, the dragon will use its explosive Anidmad version, which does huge damage to everyone in the arena. Upon defeat, the dragon lets out a great roar, vanishing back into light once more. After this, the Warrior of Light begins to leave the area, but Midgard Sorma speaks out once more, bidding us speak the reason we came to this place. We tell him of our guidance of the bright dragon's star, and the father of dragons laughs, claiming that his people have heard the song, and that Ishgard will burn, going on to say that dragons do not forget. The dragon song appears to be emanating from one of Midgard Sorma's children, singing loud for retribution, and the former simply sings the chorus. The Warrior of Light emanates the protection given by Hydaelyn, and Midgard Sorma, recognizing the aura, remembers Hydaelyn, and tells us that he will not harm us. However, firing a beam of light through our chest, we experience a vision of the realm containing the crystals of light we obtained from the primals, and one by one they begin to lose their luster and fade, finally along with the magical pattern we stand upon. Returning to our senses, Midgard Sorma explains that although he will not harm us, he has stripped us of the blessing of light, instead binding himself to the Warrior of Light with the Covenant, apparently with Hydaelyn herself, to us. The spirit of Midgard-Sommer then fades, warning us that the Dragon Song heralds a new beginning, as well as a final end. Finally, we return to the Rising Stones and explain the situation to Minfilia and the Scions, whereupon we turn to the one blunt statement made by the dragon, that Ishgard will burn. Alphinaud leaves to inform Sir Emmerich of the incoming attack, while keeping the whole story under wraps, but Minfilia notes a change in our demeanour. We explain the dissolving of the Blessing of Light caused by Midgard-Sommer, and Minfilia speculates herself that although it was thought that Midgard-Sommer was decreed as the Keeper of the Lake by Althik and Nymea, it seems ever more likely that such a covenant was formed through Hydaelyn, opposed to the 12 themselves. The avatar of Midgard-Sommer appears before us once more, questioning if we are but a pawn of fate, or master of it, before vanishing once more. And that's the end of the story and lore of the Keeper of the Lake, the father of all dragons, falling at an almighty battle with innumerable airships, going on to be much less permanently out of the picture as once thought, and with the threat of the Dragonsong War's climax looming, he trails us at every turn, with the Covenant binding more than just his spirit. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, leave a like and subscribe to the channel for more Final Fantasy XIV lore, and I'll see you next time for the hard mode version of the Wanderer's Palace.